The air was thick with the scent of rain and regret that evening. The kind of night where the world felt like it was holding its breath. I was 16, still learning the weight of trust, when I handed over the keys to my beat-up Honda Civic to Ms. Clara Henshaw, my high school English teacher. She was 35, sharp as a tack, with a smile that could charm a snake. Everyone loved her students, parents, even the grumpy principal who never smiled. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Her words always laced with just enough warmth to make you believe she cared. I believed it, too, when she asked to borrow my car for an emergency. Her own car, she said, was in the shop, and she needed to get to her sick mother across town. How could I say no? She was Ms. Henshaw, the teacher who'd read my essays with a gleam in her eye, the one who told me I could be a writer someday. I stood in the school parking lot, the keys heavy in my palm, hesitating for just a second. My dad's voice echoed in my head. That car's your responsibility. Lily, don't let just anyone drive it. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Ms. Henshaw, the woman who'd spent hours after class helping me perfect my college application essay. So I handed them over, her fingers brushing mine as she flashed that grateful smile. I'll have it back by morning, she promised. You're a lifesaver, Lily. Morning came, but my car didn't. I called her. No answer. Texted. No reply. By noon, panic clawed at my chest. I biked to her house, a tidy little bungalow on the edge of town. And there it was, me Civic, crumpled like a discarded soda can, the front bumper kissing her mailbox. My heart sank. The hood was bent, the windshield cracked, and the driver's side door sported a dent deep enough to hold a story of its own. I knocked, but the house was silent. When I finally tracked her down at school the next day, she was all apologies, her voice dripping with syrupy regret. Oh, Lily, I'm so sorry. Someone must have hit it while it was parked. I didn't even notice until now. Her eyes didn't meet mine, and something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. I wanted to believe her, but the cracks in her story were as glaring as the ones in my windshield. My dad, though, he didn't buy it for a second. At 70, Dad was a man of few words but fierce convictions. He'd raised me on his own since Mom passed when I was 6. And he poured every spare dollar into that car for my 16th birthday. It wasn't just a car, it was his trust, his sacrifice, his belief in me. When I told him what happened, his jaw tightened, and his eyes, usually soft and crinkled with laughter, turned hard as steel. Lily, he said, his voice low. People don't just lie about things like this unless they've got something to hide. He didn't say much more, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. Dad wasn't the type to let things slide, not when it came to family. He'd always taught me that truth was the foundation of everything: relationships, justice, even love. And right then, I could tell he was already planning to unearth whatever Clara Henshaw was burying. That night, Dad sat at the kitchen table, his old laptop humming as he typed with 2 fingers, slow but deliberate. He wasn't tech-savvy, but he was stubborn. He started digging first into Clara's story, then into her life. He called the mechanic she claimed had her car, only to learn she'd never dropped it off. He checked traffic reports from that night, found no record of a hit-and-run near her house. Then he stumbled across something that made his eyes narrow, a post on a local forum, buried deep, about a woman matching Clara's description speeding through a red light the same night my car was wrecked. The poster, a bartender, mentioned seeing her leave a downtown bar, unsteady on her feet, before climbing into a car that looked a lot like mine. Dad didn't confront her right away. He was patient, methodical, like a hunter setting a trap. He started talking to people: neighbors, colleagues, even students. Clara's reputation was pristine, but Dad had a knack for finding cracks in facades. He learned she'd been late to class more than once lately. Her eyes bloodshot, her lessons less polished. Whispers of a messy divorce, unpaid bills, and a temper she kept hidden under that perfect smile began to surface. Dad didn't just want answers. He wanted justice. Not just for my car, but for the betrayal of trust. By the end of the week, he'd pieced together enough to know Clara hadn't been visiting her sick mother. She'd been at a bar, drinking, and she'd driven my car into her mailbox in a haze of bad decisions. Then she lied to my face, to my dad's face, to everyone's face. I was furious. But Dad, he was something else quietly, terrifyingly determined. "Lily," he said, standing in the garage, staring at the wrecked Civic. "Sometimes you don't just fix what's broken. You make sure the person who broke it learns a lesson they won't forget." Dad wasn't a vengeful man, but he believed in consequences. He'd spent his life as a mechanic, fixing things, cars, appliances, even people's problems when they'd let him. But this was different. Clara's lie wasn't just about a car. It was about disrespect, about taking advantage of a kid who trusted her. I could see it eating at him, the way his hands clenched when he talked about her. He wasn't going to let her walk away with a smile and a shrug. The next morning, Dad drove us to the police station. He'd gathered his evidence like a lawyer prepping for trial: the bartender's post, the mechanic's statement, a neighbor's security camera footage showing my car pulling into Clara's driveway at 2 a.m., its headlights wobbling. The officer, a tired man named Jenkins, raised an eyebrow as Dad laid it all out. "You've done your homework, Mr. Harper," he said, almost impressed. They couldn't charge Clara without more proof. But they filed a report, and Jenkins promised to look into it. Dad nodded, but I knew he wasn't done. Back home, he started writing. Not a letter, not a complaint, but a post for the town's online community board, a place where everyone from the mayor to the local baker aired their grievances. His words were careful but cutting, laying out the facts without embellishment. Clara Henshaw borrowed a student's car, wrecked it, and lied about it. He didn't name me, but he didn't need to. The post spread like wildfire. By evening, it had hundreds of comments, parents shocked, students whispering about times Clara had seemed off. Someone even mentioned seeing her at the bar that night, confirming Dad's suspicions. Clara called me that night, her voice shaking. "Lily, you have to tell your dad to take that post down. It's ruining me." I could hear the panic, but also something else: anger. Like I was the one who'd betrayed her. I mumbled something about talking to him, but when I hung up, I didn't say a word to Dad. I was starting to see her differently, like a mask had slipped. The woman who'd inspired me to write was now someone I didn't recognize. Dad wasn't satisfied with the post alone. He went to the school board, armed with his evidence and a quiet fury that made people listen. He didn't yell or threaten. He just told the truth, plain and raw. The board members, a mix of tired bureaucrats and concerned parents, promised to investigate. Clara was put on leave the next day, her classroom empty, her name on everyone's lips. I felt a pang of guilt. She'd been my favorite teacher, but then I'd look at my car, still sitting broken in our garage, and the guilt turned to anger. At school, the air was thick with gossip. Kids whispered about Clara's drinking, her divorce, her lies. Some defended her, saying she was under stress, that Dad was going too far. Others, though, started sharing their own stories, assignments graded unfairly, favoritism toward certain students, moments when Clara's charm felt more like manipulation. I stayed quiet, torn between the teacher I'd admired and the woman Dad was exposing. I wanted to believe she was still good, but the evidence was piling up. And it wasn't just about my car anymore. Dad, meanwhile, kept pushing. He found out Clara had been up for a promotion to department head, a role that would have given her more influence, a bigger paycheck. He wrote to the superintendent, detailing her irresponsibility, her dishonesty. He didn't just want her to lose the promotion. He wanted her to face the weight of her choices. People like her, he told me, they don't change unless they're forced to see themselves. I started to notice changes in Dad, too. He was tired, his eyes heavier than usual, but there was a fire in him I hadn't seen in years. He'd always been my rock, steady and unshakable, but this was different. This was personal. Clara's lie had struck at something deep in him, maybe the memory of Mom, who'd been betrayed by a friend before she died, or maybe just the principle of it all. Whatever it was, he wasn't backing down. By the end of the second week, Clara's reputation was fraying. The school board's investigation confirmed Dad's claims, and whispers of her being fired started circulating. I overheard a teacher say Clara had been seen crying in her car, her perfect facade crumbling. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd been my hero. After all, but another part, the part that listened to Dad, knew she'd brought this on herself. I wondered what she was thinking. If she regretted borrowing my car, lying to me, or if she just regretted getting caught. The town was small, the kind where secrets don't stay buried long. Clara's fall from grace was the talk of every coffee shop, every parent-teacher meeting. I couldn't walk down the school hallway without hearing her name, whispered like a cautionary tale. Kids I barely knew asked me about the car, about Dad's post, about what really happened. I kept my answers short, my eyes on the floor. I didn't want to be the center of this storm, but Dad's actions had made me one. Clara didn't come back to school. Her leave turned into a suspension, and the school board's investigation dug deeper. They found more than just my car. Incident attendance records showed she'd been absent or late more often than reported, and a few parents came forward with complaints about her behavior. One said she'd snapped at their kid in class. Another mentioned smelling alcohol on her breath during a parent conference. The pieces were forming a picture of a woman unraveling, her charm a thin veneer over a life spinning out of control. Dad wasn't gloating, though. He didn't talk about Clara much anymore. But I could tell he was still watching, waiting to see how far the consequences would reach. He'd always said accountability wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. If you let people slide, he told me one night, his hands greasy from working on an old engine, they'll keep sliding until they hurt someone worse. I nodded, but I was starting to feel the weight of it all. Clara wasn't just a teacher anymore. She was a person, flawed and falling, and I wasn't sure how to feel about being part of her downfall. Then came the letter. It arrived in our mailbox, handwritten, addressed to me. Clara's handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, but the words were raw, desperate. She apologized, not just for the car, but for lying, for letting me down. She said she'd been struggling her divorce, her finances, the pressure to be the perfect teacher everyone expected. I made a mistake. Lily, she wrote. I panicked. I didn't mean to hurt you. She begged me to talk to Dad, to ask him to stop. She said she was losing everything, her job, her reputation, her future. I sat on my bed, reading the letter over and over, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe she was just a person who'd messed up. But another part, the part that saw my car wrecked, my trust broken, can't let it go. I showed the letter to Dad, expecting him to soften, but his face stayed hard. She's sorry because she's caught, he said, not because she's changed. He handed the letter back to me, his voice gentle but firm. You decide what to do, Lily, but don't let her tears make you forget what she did. I didn't respond to Clara. I couldn't find the words. Instead, I watched as the town kept talking. the story growing legs of its own. Someone posted a photo of Clara's car for sale online, a sign she was scrambling for cash. Another rumor said she'd moved out of her bungalow, maybe to avoid the stairs. I felt a strange mix of pity and anger every time I heard her name. She'd been my mentor, the one who'd made me believe in my words. But she'd also lied to me, used me, and now she was paying for it. Dad, meanwhile, was relentless. He went to a school board meeting, standing tall in his worn flannel, speaking not as a parent, but as a man who'd been wronged. He didn't mention the car this time. He talked about trust, about how teachers are supposed to protect students, not exploit them. The room was silent when he finished, and I heard later that one board member had tears in her eyes. They voted to terminate Clara's contract that night. She was officially fired. I thought that would be the end of it. But Dad wasn't done. He found out Clara had applied for a teaching job in a neighboring town. He didn't hesitate, he sent his evidence there. 2. A packet of everything he'd gathered. The other school district didn't hire her. I overheard him on the phone with a friend, saying, "If she's not fit to teach here, she's not fit to teach anywhere." His voice wasn't cruel, just certain, like he was stating a fact as simple as the sun rising. I started to wonder if Dad was going too far. Clara had lost her job, her home, her standing in the community. Wasn't that enough? I asked him one night, my voice small. He looked at me, his eyes softening for the first time in weeks. "Lily," he said, "this isn't just about you or me. It's about making sure she doesn't hurt anyone else. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it's the only way to keep things right." School wasn't the same without Clara. Her replacement, a nervous young teacher fresh out of college, tried hard but couldn't fill the void. My English class felt hollow, the spark gone. I missed Clara's passion for literature, the way she'd read poetry like it was a secret she was sharing just with us. But every time I felt that pang of loss, I'd remember her letter, her lie, the dent in my car. I'd remember Dad's words, truth over everything. The town moved on, as small towns do, finding new scandals to chew on. But Clara's story lingered in my mind, a puzzle I couldn't solve. I started writing about it, not for school, but for myself, filling pages with my anger, my confusion, my guilt. Writing was how I made sense of things, how I sorted through the mess of emotions Clara had left behind. I wrote about her smile, her betrayal, the way Dad had taken a sledgehammer to her world. I wrote about trust, how fragile it was, how once it broke, it never quite fit back together the same. One day, I found Clara's letter tucked in my desk drawer, its edges worn from being read too many times. I decided to visit her, not to forgive her, not to confront her, but to understand. I biked to her old bungalow, only to find a "for sale" sign in the yard, the windows dark. A neighbor, watering her roses, told me Clara had moved to an apartment downtown, a small place above a laundromat. I hesitated, then pedaled there, my heart pounding. The building was grim, its paint peeling, the air heavy with detergent and despair. I knocked on her door, half hoping she wouldn't answer. But she did, and the sight of her hit me like a punch. Clara looked older, her hair limp, her eyes dull. She wasn't the vibrant teacher I'd known. She was just a woman, tired and broken. "Lily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to ask why she'd lied, why she'd used me, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked, "Are you okay?" It was a stupid question, but it was all I had. She laughed, a bitter sound, and invited me in. Her apartment was sparse, just a couch, a table, a few boxes. She offered me water, her hands trembling as she poured. We talked for an hour, She told me about her divorce, how it had gutted her, left her drowning in debt and shame. She admitted to drinking that night, to driving my car when she shouldn't have, to panicking when she hit the mailbox. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, tears in her eyes. I didn't know how to fix it." I listened, not sure if I believed her, not sure if it mattered. I left without saying much, but her words stayed with me, heavy as the rain that started falling as I biked home. When I told Dad about the visit, he didn't get mad. He just listened, his face unreadable. "You're trying to understand her," he said finally. "That's good. But don't let understanding become an excuse." He was right. But I couldn't shake the image of Clara in that barren apartment, her life stripped bare. I wondered if Dad's pursuit of justice had gone too far, if it had broken her beyond repair. Then came the news that Clara had found a job not teaching, but working as a receptionist at a car dealership. It was a step down, a humbling one, but it was something. I felt a flicker of relief. But Dad's expression didn't change when I told him. "She's starting over," he said. "That's what happens when you face the truth." I wasn't sure if he meant it as a victory or just a fact. I started repairing my car with Dad, spending evenings in the garage, learning how to hammer out dents, replace a windshield. It was slow work, but it felt good, like we were fixing more than just metal. Dad didn't talk much, but he'd hum old songs, and sometimes he'd smile at me, proud. I realized this was his way of teaching me not just about cars, but about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. By the time the car was drivable again, I felt different, stronger, maybe, but also sadder, like I'd lost something I couldn't name. Clara's fall had taught me that people aren't always what they seem, that trust is a gamble, that justice can feel like a double-edged sword. I kept writing, filling notebooks with my thoughts, trying to make sense of it all. Months passed, and the car was almost good as new. Dad and I had sanded, painted, and polished it until it gleamed under the garage lights. Every dent we fixed felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of what Clara had broken. But the car wasn't the only thing we were repairing. I was learning to trust myself again, to listen to that quiet voice in my gut that had hesitated when I handed Clara the keys. Dad, too, seemed lighter, like he'd laid down a burden he'd carried for too long. I saw Clara once more, by chance, at the grocery store. She was in the cereal aisle, her cart half empty, her shoulders hunched. She didn't see me at first, and I almost turned away. But something made me walk over. "Ms. Henshaw," I said, my voice steady. She flinched, then turned, her face a mix of surprise and shame. "Lily," she said, gripping her cart like it was an anchor. "You look grown up." We didn't talk long. She asked about school, about the car. I told her it was fixed, that Dad and I had done it together. She nodded, her eyes distant. "I'm trying to start over," she said quietly. "It's not easy, but I'm trying." I wanted to say something profound, something that would tie up the loose ends of our story. But all I managed was, "I hope you do." She smiled, a ghost of her old charm, and we parted ways. Back home, I told Dad about it. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "People can change, Lily, but they've got to want it." I thought about Clara, about her letter, her apartment, her new job. I wondered if she'd learned anything, if the weight of her choices had made her better or just bitter. I hoped it was the former, but I wasn't sure. My writing took on a new depth after that. I started submitting essays to competitions, pouring my heart into stories about trust, betrayal, and redemption. One piece, about a girl and her dad fixing a broken car, won a regional award. When I read it at the ceremony, I saw Dad in the audience. his eyes shining with pride. It was the first time I'd seen him cry since Mom died. Clara's name faded from the town's gossip, replaced by newer dramas. But her story stayed with me. A reminder that people are complex, that heroes can fall, that justice isn't always clean. I kept her letter in a box under my bed. Not because I forgave her, but because it was part of my story now, part of who I was becoming. Dad and I drove the Civic to my college orientation that fall. It wasn't perfect, there were still faint scars in the paint. A creak in the door, but it was ours. Rebuilt with our hands. Our time. Our trust. On the drive, Dad told me stories about Mom. About how she'd loved to write. Too. How she believed in standing up for what's right. I realized then that his fight for justice wasn't just about Clara or the carrot, was about Mom. About me. About the values he wanted to pass on. When we pulled into the college parking lot, I felt a surge of gratitude for him. For his stubborn heart. His unwavering sense of right and wrong. He wasn't perfect either, gone hard at Clara. Maybe too hard, but he'd taught me that truth matters. That trust is worth protecting. That sometimes you have to break something to make it whole again. I hugged him before he left. Longer than usual. You did good, kid, he said, his voice rough. Keep writing. I promised I would. And as he drove away, I felt the weight of his lessons settle into me. Steady and sure. College was a new world, full of voices and ideas that challenged everything I thought I knew. But I carried Dad's lessons with me. And Clara's, too. Her betrayal had left a mark. But it had also given me something, a story to tell. A lens to see the world through. I majored in English, diving into books and essays with a hunger I hadn't known before. My professors noticed my intensity, the way I wrestled with themes of trust and redemption in my work. One even suggested I turn my story about the car into a memoir. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But the idea planted a seed. I kept in touch with Dad, calling him every Sunday. He'd update me on the garage, the town, the Civic, which he still drove sometimes, just to keep her running. He didn't talk about Clara anymore, and neither did I, but her shadow lingered in our silences. I wondered what she was doing, if she'd found a way to rebuild, if she'd learned to be honest with herself. One day, during my sophomore year, I got an email from her. It was short, formal, almost like a business letter. She'd read my award-winning essay online, the one about fixing the car with Dad. She said it moved her, that it made her see herself through my eyes. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she thanked me for telling the story, for being honest in a way she hadn't been. I'm still working on myself, she wrote. I hope you keep writing. I didn't reply, but I saved the email. Another piece of the puzzle. By my junior year, I was interning at a local newspaper, writing features about small-town life. I pitched a story about accountability, about how communities hold people to their actions. My editor loved it, and I spent weeks interviewing people, parents, teachers, even a former mayor who'd had his own fall from grace. I didn't mention Clara by name, but her story was there, woven into the fabric of the piece. When it was published, Dad called me, his voice proud. You're telling the truth, Lily, he said. That's all that matters. The Civic broke down again that year, its engine finally giving out. Dad and I decided to let it go, selling it for parts. It felt like closing a chapter, but not an ending. The car had been more than metal, it had been a lesson. A bond. A story. I used the money from the sale to buy a laptop, one I used to write my first novel. A story about a girl and her father navigating a world full of broken trust and hard-won truths. Years later, I heard Clara had moved out of state, started teaching again at a small private school. Someone said she was different now, quieter, humbler, maybe even better. I hoped it was true, not for her sake, but for the kids she taught, for the trust she might rebuild. I never saw her again, but I carried her story with me, a reminder that people can break, but they can also mend, if they choose to. Dad passed away my senior year, a heart attack that came too fast. At his funeral, I read a piece I'd written about him, about the man who'd taught me to fix what's broken, to fight for what's right, to never let a lie stand unchallenged. The church was full, the air thick with love and loss. I felt him there, in the words, in the faces of the people he'd touched. I kept writing, publishing stories that wrestled with the messy, beautiful truth of being human. Clara's lie, Dad's justice, my own growth, they were all part of me. Threads in a tapestry I was still weaving. The car was gone, but its story lived on. In every word I wrote, in every truth I told.